Now that we've come up with the IS curve, which shows us a combination of interest rates and GDPs that are equilibrium combinations in the goods and services market, we want to talk about the financial market. For the financial market, first we need to discuss the theory of liquidity preference. And this theory of liquidity preference basically says that interest rates are determined by the supply and the demand for money. When we are talking about the supply of money, we need to remember the supply of money is basically controlled by the central bank. When we were discussing the aggregate demand curve earlier in one of our lectures, we discussed the theory of quantity of money, in which we discussed the equation MV is equal to PY. The M in that equation is the quantity of money in circulation. This liquidity preference theory says that there is a demand for money, and by the demand of money, we mean the demand for liquid money, and by liquid money, we mean money that is easily converted or assets that are easily converted into cash, for example, your current accounts, your saving accounts, and cash. The demand for liquid assets is basically going to be determined by two factors, and this demand for liquid money is going to be a function of interest rates. So, for example, if somebody says that if I give or invest all my money in this project, it give me 2000% interest, I'd rather not want to keep liquid money with myself and would want to invest the money in the business and gain from the high returns. The second factor that determines the demand for liquid money is your income. If you have high incomes, you would have a higher demand for liquid money or cash that you keep in your wallet. So these are two factors. Higher interest rates would lead to lower demand for liquid money, and higher income would lead to higher demand for liquid money. When we talk about the supply of money is controlled by the central bank, and this is M. But rather than just talking about nominal money, in this model we will be discussing real money. And the formula for real money is the amount of money that I have. If I divide it by the general price levels of things, I get what's called my real money balance. If I have 1,000 rupees and I can buy a phone with it, let's just say an iPhone with it, versus somebody in next door has 1,000,000 rupees and he can only use the 1,000,000 rupees to buy that same one phone with it. In real terms, our real money balance is the same. We both can use our money to buy only one item and that one phone with the money that we have. So we have the same amount of real money. So this is the quantity of money in the economy divided by the general price levels. That should give you the quantity of things that you can buy with the amount of money in circulation. That's called the real money balance. So in this model of liquidity preference, we will be having interest rates on the y-axis, and on the x-axis we will have real money balances, which is depicted by M over P. This is money in real terms. And we're saying that the central bank actually controls the amount of money in circulation at any given point in time. So the central bank controls the quantity of money in circulation, and the price levels at a certain point in time are relatively stable. So this is the supply of money. The demand for liquid money is inversely related with interest rates. If interest rates are high, you would want to keep more money in a project rather than keep it in your pockets. So as interest rates increase, the demand for liquid money goes down. So the demand curve for money is actually a downward sloping curve, just like a normal demand curve. And it is dependent, the money demand is dependent on one, your interest rates and the amount of money you have. Rich people normally have more money in their wallets. And interest rates adjust to a point where the demand for money is equal to the supply of money in circulation, and that is how you come up with the interest rate in the financial market. Now recall that we used the Keynesian cross to come up with the IS curve. We'll be using this model of liquidity preference to come up with the LM curve. And in order to come up with an LM curve, we will have to make a couple of assumptions over here. And the first assumption that we have to make over here is that this demand curve is based on an income level of say 100,000 rupees. So a person who has an income level of 100,000 would have such a demand for money. And using this demand for money, the interest rates that are prevailing in the economy are R star. So with somebody having an income of 100 rupees, this is what his money demand would look like. And the point where the demand and supply equates, that is where you come up with the interest rates that are prevailing in the economy. Recall that when we were discussing, when we were deriving the IS curve, we derived the IS curve by plotting the combination of interest rates and GDP on a graph. In this case, at a GDP of 100, your interest rates are R star. So this is point. Okay. Since this is a combination of interest rates and GDP, what happens in this model of liquidity preference when income increases from 100 to say 200? When income increases from 100 to 200, this person has more money. When he has more money, he would want to have more money in his wallet. So the demand for liquid money for this particular person would go up, and his money demand curve would shift forward, and now the income at income 200,000, he'd have a different money demand curve. And here there's going to be another equilibrium point, and at this equilibrium point the interest rates are going to be higher interest rates. Let's call them R star 1. So at income 200, interest rates are higher and they are R star. They're R star 1. So this is the second equilibrium. Let me just label them over here. This was A and this becomes B. And if you combine these together, you come up with what's called the LM curve. Liquidity and money curve. And this is showing you two equilibriums in the financial market. We need to make sure we understand that point A was an equilibrium in the market, and so was point B. All combinations of interest rates and GDP on this LM curve are actually equilibriums in the financial market. Just as we did with the IS curve, we discussed what factors actually cause the LM curve to shift. And in order to discuss factors that cause the LM curve to shift, we'll go to the slides and discuss this. Uh, so this is the definition, and then you have real money balances and interest rates, and this is the amount of money that is this is the supply of money, which is controlled by the central bank. And then you have the demand for liquid money, which is a function of interest rates and your income. And Interest rates adjust to equate supply and demand for money, and that is where you come up with the interest rates in the economy, interest rates in the financial market. Now we want to discuss what causes a shift in the um LM curve. But before we discuss what causes the shift in the LM curve, let's just figure out how, in this model, the central bank increases interest rates. The central bank increases interest rates in the financial market by increasing, yeah, or decreasing the money supply. If the central bank decreases the money supply, and this M1 over here, if it decreases it, what happens is the supply curve shifts backwards and the new equilibrium is established, which is at a higher interest rates, so causing interest rates to go up. What we need to understand is that this interest rate is not the policy rate that we've discussed, which was a tool of the central bank. What we're saying is central bank reduces money supply, but we need to remember, if you recall the tool, the policy rate, money supply falls when the policy rate goes up. So the central bank increases its policy rate, which causes the money supply to go down. When the money supply goes down, this supply curve shifts backwards and it causes the interest rates in the financial market to go up. So, what causes the LM curve to shift? So, in the case of the IS curve, we said that any factor besides the two factors, interest rates and GDP changing, would cause the IS curve to shift. It's the same with the LM curve. Factors beside interest rate and GDP changing would result in a shift in the LM curve. In this case, we're talking about a change in the quantity of money in circulation. If the quantity of money in circulation changes and your income is the same, what happens is at Y1, now the interest rate is not R1 any longer, it's R2 now. So at a GDP of Y1, your interest rates are higher now, which means your LM curve shifts upwards. Now that we've figured out what causes shifts, I'd like you in your own free time to try this example and see if you can make sense out of it. Use the liquidity preference model and see what happens to the LM curve. Now that we have come up with two curves, these two curves are representing the goods and services market and the financial market. The goods and services market represented by the IS curve and the LM curve representing the financial market. We can put them both together, and the point where these two curves intersect is where the interest rate or the equilibrium interest rate of the economy is established. We need to remember that all points along the IS curve are equilibrium points, but in the goods and services market only. All points along the LM curve are equilibrium points, but in the financial market only. There is only going to be one point, one combination of interest rates and GDP, which is going to give equilibrium in both the financial and goods and services market, and that is going to be the interest rate. That is going to be the equilibrium interest rate of the economy. So we will stop over here, and then in the next video we'll discuss what causes movements and shifts, and discuss different policy measures as well in reference to the ISLM model.